So we're continuing with Chapter 10 for Part 2, Chapter 10 of the 2015 International Fire Code. This is part of the Fire Inspector 1 and Fire Inspector 2 explanation for the ICC certification exam. So means of egress, this corresponds to NFPA 101. It's a lot shorter than NFPA 101. There's Chapter 10, but this represents IFC's means of egress section. Now this is basically exactly the same as what you'd find in the International Building Code. So is Chapter 9, so is Chapter 8. So let's run through Chapter 10, means of egress, some of the things to look for that are going to be on the ICC Fire Inspector 1 and Fire Inspector 2 tests are as follows. So this, if you're doing a detached 1 and 2 family dwellings, go with the residential code. This is for, the residential code is going to be applicable for up to 3 stories for residences, including apartment complexes, as well as townhomes. So this is going to be above 3 stories or occupancies other than, things like R2 and R3. So let's run through this really quick. So this applies to exit access, and exit discharge. It's important to go back to Chapter 2, understand those definitions. If you see the term exit, it has a specific definition. Exit can be as simple as the width of a door, 1 3/8. It could also be 100 feet long, such as an exit passageway or going into an exit stairway enclosure. Exit access is any location in the structure, like at a desk or from a closet, wherever, to an exit. An exit discharge is from the exit of the building, or let's say an exit stairway, to a public way. And it's important to know those definitions because each one have length requirements or width requirements that you got to follow. So understand those definitions. Ceiling height. So this differs a little bit from the residential code, if you're familiar with that. In the IFC, it's 7 feet 6 inches. So keep that in mind. 90 inches is the minimum, except for mezzanine, it's 7 feet. Door closers, as far as height goes, 7'6" is there, but for the most part, it's your headroom is going to be 80 inches, except for a door closer that's 78 inches. So just remember, protruding headroom objects is 80 inches. That's an important thing to know right there. But you can drop it down to 78 inches for door closures, and it gives you this allowance for 50%. This is something you're going to see in the test. That is as well. Normal height, 7'6", protrusions down to 80 inches for head clearance. Now, regarding the widths for protrusions are 4 inches. I don't have everything detailed here in terms of highlights, but it's just important to know that horizontal projections, let's see, 27 inches. Yeah, okay, so this is mainly ADA, A117.1. That's the Americans with Disability Act policy, A117.1. You'll see that in Chapter 11 of the IBC, but regardless, what this is saying is if you're going down a corridor, you can't extend more than 4 inches into the required clear width, and we'll get to clear width here shortly. But if you're above 20, how should I put this? Let's say you have a protrusion that sticks out from the wall 10 inches. If it is more than 27 inches from the bottom or under 80 inches from the top, you have to blank off the bottom, and that's because people with canes are walking by. They need to be able to feel the protrusion, because typically above 27 inches, they'll run into that. So that's what this means. So the 4-inch protrusion has to deal with the 27 and 80-inch vertical heights from the floor. 4 inches from the side is what that is. So this is important. That'll be in the test. You'll be asked about it. Let's see. And we'll get into the widths later. It's in another section, and I'll show that to you, but we'll go through this for now. Let's see. Just don't block egress. Fixed seating, you calculate that a little bit different. Occupant load. Okay, so understand, you see signs sometimes that require, this area to have an occupant load of like 23 people. I'll show you later, but that's not required by the code. If you're under 50 people, you never need an occupancy sign. If you're in a room that has more than 49 people, you're required to have it. But what you need to know about this section here is this is a minimum. These occupant load factors, let me explain what they are. So if I have a room, let's say I have a business area, and a business area is 1,000 square feet. So this office area is 1,000 square feet. And there's a difference. Gross and net it's as it sounds. Gross is going to take into consideration your column area and walls thickness, things like that. Net is actual net space that's available. But let's look at a business area. If I have a business area as 1,000 square feet, I can only fit 10 people in there based on the occupant load factors of table 1004.1.2. Now in subsequent versions like the 2021 or 2018, it's 1004.5. Don't be duped. Some of these references change a little bit, but the table's the same. Another thing I want to point out, don't get caught up on this. This is a minimum. You can always go to like 50 square feet per person. In fact, you can go down to 7 square feet per person if the FCO deems it is necessary. So don't get caught up on this. The limiting factor is your means of egress widths, and I'll explain that later. Like a door, based on this code, a door for a sprinkler facility can allow 0.15 inch per person. So if I'm like a 32-inch clear width door, the reality is I can have like 210 people going through that door. That's your limiting factor, not so much this. But people get caught up on this. ICC expect you to understand that. So what they're going to ask is, they're going to say there's a 10,000 square foot airport, what do you call those areas where you pick up the luggage, that kind of thing. In fact, it's defined in here. I'm not going to go through and find it, but the reality is, does that 10,000 square feet, is it limited to this 100 square feet per person area? It's not. It's limited to your means of egress. You can have a lot more than 100 people in that 10,000 square foot concourse for an airport, and they're going to ask you that. So don't get caught up on this. This is design load factors, and it even says it there. If you look through this, I'm not going to take the time to read it, but it says this is a minimum. And a lot of HJs get caught up on that. Don't be duped. You can go down to 7 square feet. In fact, if you look here, standing space for like a dance hall, it's actually 5 square feet. If you look at NFPA 101 for areas of refuge, it's 3 square feet per person. So don't be caught up on this. But know this table. They're going to ask you that. You need to calculate it. But they're also going to give you the example of, like I mentioned before, the airport concourse. That's an example right off the ICC test that I'm giving you. Okay, let's just jump. Oh, yeah, one other thing, I want to point out something just to show how flexible this is. The General Service Agencies of the GSA of the United States of America, they did a survey in 2009 and found that their particular estimates for government buildings were 150 square feet per person, not 100 square feet per person. So in 2018 and subsequent versions of the IFC and IBC, both IFC and IBC, it's 150 for this number. So that's just additional evidence. Don't get caught up on this. This is 100. New versions of IFC says 150. But these are occupant load factors that are a minimum. They're an absolute minimum. You can always go more than that in terms of the density of people. And what I mean by more is going down to like 50 square feet per person here would be more people you're allowing. So that's what that means. Okay, let's jump over here. Posting and occupant load. Okay, this is what I meant by that. Every room or space that is an assembly occupancy shall have the occupant load of the room or space posted, okay? But the definition of an assembly occupancy is over 49 people. So don't get caught up on that. Just because it says it's like a restaurant or something like that, like a Group A occupancy, doesn't mean it's an assembly occupancy. You're going to treat assembly like restaurants or things like that, in many cases, you'll interpret them as business occupancies if they're under 50 people and you don't need this posting. And actually, I'll call that out somewhere in here. I may not have it highlighted, but that's how to interpret that. So if you're asked about it, just keep in mind, you don't need postings if you're under 50 people. And this just goes through and helps you calculate it. This is a test right off of it. 18 inches for fixed seating. The occupant load of seating booths shall be based on one person for each 24 inches of booth seating. That is a test question. I put a note here. It's 18 inches for fixed seating, so just keep that in mind. So I'll try to get through this fast. I don't want to take your time. Okay, stairway. I mentioned the 0.15 before for the door widths, but let me just explain this. If you're calculating stairway widths, in a suppressed building, it's 0.2. In an unsuppressed, it's 0.3. Okay? And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a 44-inch wide stairway. Let's say it's a non-suppressed building. So it's 44 divided by 0.3. That's how you calculate your occupant load. So whatever that is, 3 times 44, that'd be a little bit more than that. But the point is, that stairwell would be able to handle like 150 people type thing. Just do the numbers. I'm doing it in my head. Now, down here, if it's suppressed, that stairway, you can use 0.2. So instead of like 150 people for an unsuppressed, unsprinklered stairway, down here it's more like 220 people if you have sprinkler capacity. And I want to be very clear, NFPA 101 does not allow this allowance for suppression. So this is just an IFC thing. If you're doing like an NFPA related fire inspector certification, this is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so down here, the capacity for other means of egress. What do I mean by that? I mean corridors and doors. Okay, doors. So it's actually 0.2 for non-stairs, non-suppressed. Up here, it's 0.15, so it's right there. Once again, this is not available in NFPA 101. It's 0.2, not 0.15. IFC gives you a little bit more latitude. Okay, so down here, doors when fully open. This is a test question. This was a test question as well, the 0.15. Don't forget that. That's a test question. So this is a test question here. So doors when fully open shall not reduce the required width by more than 7 inches. So what I mean by required width, you have to have 32 inches of clear width. Corridors, you have to be at least 36 inches. There's some exceptions to that. But what this is saying is no matter where the door is open, you can't encroach by more than 7 inches. And when it's fully open, and doors in any position shall not reduce the required width by more than 1/2. Test question right there. Other non-structural projections such as trim. So these are projections. Handrails are 4.5 inches. It's in one of my highlights you saw before. I didn't point it out. But other non-structural projections such as trim going into that required, let's say 36-inch width, it's variable, is 1.5. Just do my highlights. You'll be successful with that. Number of exits and exit doorways. 2 exits or exit access doorways from any space shall be provided where you have a common path of egress exceeding a certain value. Now let me explain this really quick. So this table, there's a lot of information and it's kind of subtle. So common path of travel, what that means is if a person is like going down a corridor, and let's just use these. These are different numbers. Let's use a B occupancy. Let's use suppression. So it's sprinklered. It's 100 feet. Always look at the footnote. It says, so it's an NFPA 13 compliant is what that reference is. So 100 feet. So I have 100 feet. So I'm walking down this corridor. If I go to 101 feet without the option to turn in some direction, left or right, or find an exit, I'm violating this 100-foot requirement. So that's common path of travel. So if I have a room that's like 100 feet wide, I know by default that I have to have 2 doors, period. And if I have 2 doors, if I'm required to have 2 doors, it invokes other stuff. and I'll explain that. So that's how common path of travel works. This table is so you're allowed to have 49 people. It's a magic number for typical occupancies. There are some exceptions here, but let's not get caught up in those. So 49 people is a magic number for one door. If you have two doors, it invokes other things. You have to have emergency lighting. You have to have emergency exit signs, things like that. Something else here, I want to point this out. Machinery room. This very clear, machinery room has a very specific definition. It's in the International Mechanical Code. You're not going to find the definition for machinery room, refrigeration machinery rooms, anywhere in the IMC or IFC. This has to do with having a certain level of refrigerant, so don't get duped by that. This does not apply to all rooms with refrigeration equipment, but just keep in mind that you have to have two doors if you're over 1,000 square feet. So it's just some stuff like that. Same thing with boiler and furnace rooms, things like that. There's some different exit numbers, exit signs. What I mean by exit signs, they're not exits, they're necessarily exit access doors. There's doors out of the buildings. So an exit access door can be both an exit and exit access door if you're depending on where it goes. But let's not get caught up on that. Basically, you have a room, it's 100 feet wide, let's say, you have to have two doors. Just keep that in mind. That's what they're going to ask. Dead end. We'll just keep on going. Let's not get caught up on this. So, let's see. There's a few, just highlight the stuff, read the stuff I've done. It'll take me, honestly, 10 hours if I read everything and explained it. So let's not do that. This tells you when you need 3 exit access doors or exits per story. So if occupant load basis, numbers, things like that. So it'll tell you when you need 3 or more exits. So this will come up. They'll ask you this potentially. Just know two exits or exit access doors, 3 or more. So just know where to go to find that. Okay, configuration. It has to do. It has to do with a diagonal. So if you have a room, let's picture a room, okay, or a room or either a building. Let's say an office trailer. Okay, it's a rectangular shaped office trailer. So you have a rectangle. Take the diagonal of that rectangle. Okay. So what's the diagonal? So it would be basically 1 squared plus 2 squared. Take the square root of that. That's the diagonal. So use that rule. If it's a non-suppressed building, your doors have to be more than 1/2 of that diagonal. That's what this is saying. And if it's suppressed, it's 1/3 of the length. Test question right there. So don't get caught up on that. Let's see, means of egress illumination. Just highlight the stuff I have. When you go in to do testing, they're going to ask you this. What is the egress illumination on the floor? It gives you some specs for this all the way down. It's both normal illumination and emergency power illumination. So that's what the requirement is. All right, let's see. 10 seconds. Keep in mind emergency versus standby. This is emergency power. It's 10 seconds to activate. A lot of people have emergency diesel generators. They can't activate within 10 seconds. So you need like a battery backup for these. So they'll ask you this about 10 seconds. That question will come up. I already went over that in chapter 4. Okay, duration. This is a key element here. Keep in mind it's 90 minutes. So how long does emergency lighting have to last? It's 90 minutes. So I'll just turn the, well, heck. Okay, so keep in mind chapter 11 of this for existing buildings. I want to point this out. It's actually 60 minutes for existing structures, but they're going to ask you how long does the emergency light power system, backup system have to last? It's 90 minutes. Okay, accessible means of egress. So this would correspond to ADA A117.1. So let's just quickly look through this. It's just a short section here. So stairways, you need to have 48 inches if you're going to meet accessibility requirements. And keep in mind, what's accessibility mean? It's a definition. Accessibility means wheelchair accessible. So it's ADA compliant. That's what accessibility means. So anywhere you see accessibility, not exit access, but accessibility, it means wheelchair access. And like I said, so instead of a normal 36 or 44-inch stairway, you have to have a 48-inch stairway. So let's just run through some more stuff here. That's a test question, by the way. Accessible stairways are 48 inches wide. Okay, doors, gates, and turnstiles. Let's run through this. Size of doors, it's 32 inches is the minimum. There's some differences. If you're in a hospital, you have to be 41.5 inches, and the height has to be 80 inches. You can go to there's some exceptions here. Just read through those. Direction of swing, so in the event of panic and evacuation, if you have more than 49 people, so 50 or more people, the door has to swing in the direction of travel, or if it's a high hazard occupancy. So just keep that in mind. Number is 49, over 49 people. These are also test questions here. Okay, so the 50-person door swing is a question from the test. Down here you have, this is how much force is required to start it. So know that you have to initiate a door opening. Like let's say a panic hardware, it's 30 pounds to start that door, to set it in motion. So and then there's some other parameters, 5 and 15 pounds here. Door latch release when subjected to 15 pounds, for instance, and basically the force for pushing it open is 5 pounds. So just read through there, you'll figure it out. Okay, let's see, security grills. So there's some allowances here for security stuff in like a business, mercantile, or factory industrial occupancy. In fact, I circled the answer, like where were security grills allowed. The option was like an F and an R and something like that. Anyway, group F was the answer, so just read through that. Thresholds. This differs quite a bit from the International Residential Code. If you look here, the threshold for a door into a structure, for commercial structures, is 1/2 inch. So let's say you have a landing and a landing on either side of an entry door. So you have the door, the actual threshold there is only 1/2 inch. You can't trip over it. There's an allowance to go to 3/4 inch for a sliding glass door type thing, but just keep 1/2 inch in mind. That's the answer they're going to look for. Okay, door handles. So 34 to 48 inches, that's where the door handle, latch, lock, etc. has to be on a door. So that's the range between 34 and 48 inches. So this just tells you, this is actually from the test here. I don't want to read it, but this just tells you for like a mercantile, so group A, group M, that kind of thing, if it has a certain occupant load, you can have the door without a panic hardware, without an automatic latching device, as long as you mark it. So you have to actually mark that door with that sign. It's required. That's a test question right out of the test. Delayed egress. Have you ever been at Walmart and noticed those egress doors in the back that have that, alarm will sound if you press this? So this is delayed egress. You can delay for 15 seconds, it'll fire an alarm, but 15 seconds is the magic number. And you can't pass through more than one delayed access or egress locking system. So these are both questions on the test. You're going to see those. Okay, panic hardware. Panic hardware is when it has that strip on the door and you hit it and it releases the latch. So it's required in Group H, and when you're serving more than 50 people at an occupant load, or Group A or E occupancy. Or more in Group E, so you have to have a panic hardware. This is actually a test question. There's I saw two questions from that section. So just know that. That's important. Okay, stairways. So I mentioned before 40 inches is the minimum for accessibility or accessible stairways. 44 inches is normal. You can drop that down to 36 inches if, let's say, you have a small second floor type thing with less than 50 people. Okay, remember 49 is a magic number. So if you're serving less than 50 people, you can have a 36-inch stairway. Stairway headroom's 80 inches. Spirals are quite a bit different, but you may be asked on this. Headroom for spiral 78. And keep in mind, these are different numbers than the IRC. If you're used to residential construction, these are going to be a lot different. So just keep that in mind. Riser height, remember 7'11", that's what it is. 7 inches is the riser, 11 inches the tread. That is different than standard residential construction. So just keep that in mind. It'll catch you if you're familiar with residential. Commercial is more conservative. Yeah, so right here, there's residential. It's 7 3/4 and 10 for residential. So this is commercial, this is residential. R2 would be like an apartment building. Dimensional uniformity. Here's something else. 3/8 inches, the magic number. So if you have let's say you have 7 risers on a stairway. So you're going up, there's 7 risers. Let's say for whatever reason, each riser is 7 inches. But one is like 6.5 inches. Now that's a violation of the law. You have to keep all risers within 3/8 of an inch. This is a test question right there, guarantee it. So just read this. Typically you need marking stripes, depending on your application, at the nosing edge of your stairway. Just go through this and look for that, read through that for what the requirements are. Landings, the width of the landing shall not be less than the width of the stairway served, so just keep that in mind. So if you have a 44-inch width, you need 44-inch landing at a minimum, or 48-inch, that kind of thing. Let's see. Okay, keep in mind, thou shalt not have storage under exterior stairways. Period. You can't do it. In fact, you can't have it within interior exit stairway enclosures either, unless you have a 1-hour fire resistance rated construction. But Chapter 7 of the IBC goes into that a little bit more, but just keep that in mind. This is very, very clear. You're not allowed to. Test question. Vertical rise. You can't. So have you ever been in like a big building? They have 2 sets of flights of stairs for 1 story. And that's because the stories are greater than 12 feet. So you can't have a more than vertical 12 feet for a single flight of stairs. Test question. It'll come up. Spiral staircase. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, just gives you some limitations for where you can use spiral staircases. 250 square feet. Handrails. Stairway shall have handrails on each side, and you need it anytime you have 3 changes in room elevation. Exceptions, you have if it's more than 4 risers, or excuse me, more than 3, so it's 4 more risers, thou shalt have handrails, is what this is saying for group R2 and R3. So just go through the exceptions to see where it is. All right, stairway to roof. If you have more than 4 stories, you have to have a stairway to the roof. Ramps. So there's ICC A117.1. It's referenced here, but basically it's 1 in 12 to 1 in 20 slope is the definition of a ramp. You can go to 1 in 8, but it says it right here. This is a test question. 1 vertical in 12 units. So I'll give you a list of slopes. The correct one's 1 in 12. But there's a range. It's 1 in 12 to 1 in 20 for allowable accessible slopes. Cross slopes. So if you have a sidewalk, you can't have more than 2% slope. That's 1 in 48. So it's 2% there. That's what drives that. Width capacity, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. 36 inches, or you just go through this. Means of egress ramps shall not be reduced in width. Doors opening onto a landing shall not reduce the clear width to less than 42 inches. So just highlight the stuff I've highlighted, go through that. Landing length on a ramp shall be 60 inches minimum. And you'll go through, a lot of this is right out of A117.1. Some is a little bit more conservative. Not everything in Chapter 10 is accessibility. So you can have means of egress, exit access that's not accessibility compliant, but you have to have a certain percentage that are, and it goes through that in A117.1. Okay, exit signs, exit and exit access doors. Okay, so basically 100 feet. So you have to, in a corridor, I want to be clear, this is exit access corridors, okay, or passageways. This isn't aisles. I want to be very clear about that. So anywhere within an exit access corridor, you need to be able to see an exit sign within 100 feet unless it's obvious. So unless the exit's obvious. So just 100 feet, this is a test question. Does not apply to aisles necessarily or like factory industrial occupancy. So don't get confused by that. Okay, graphics. Let's see. Just bear with me for a second. So externally illuminated exit signs. So if you have like you have reflective exit signs, you're allowed to have them. They don't self-glow as long as the light's shining on them and they reflect back. But this gives you the stroke, 3/4 inch stroke, 6 inches high. So exit. The term exit has very specific requirements. And exit signs have to be illuminated for 90 minutes, just like emergency egress lighting. Okay, handrails. It'll ask you what's the minimum size of handrails. It's 1 1/4 inches. It's right there. That's actually a test question. Handrail height, 34 to 38 inches, just like the IRC. They're going to ask you that. Let's see, projections. So stairways are allowed to have projections of 4.5 inches for handrails. Normally it's 4 inches, or for trim 1.5 inches, but you can go 4.5 inches for handrails. Guards. So guards are different than handrails. Guards keep you from falling out. There's two kinds of guards. An industrial occupancy may have a toe kick, a middle rail, and a top rail. But what this is talking about is if you have public access areas, you need guards anywhere where you could fall more than 30 inches. And it has specific requirements. You have to be 42 inches high. Test question, 30 inches is the magic number there, 42 there. They will ask you that. And here's another question. The magic number is 4 inches. So through the guards in public access guard railing type thing, you can't fit a sphere more than 4 inches, or more than 4 inches through. The principle there is like a kid could put his neck through there and get choked. So that's what drove that 4-inch size. Okay, yeah. So I mentioned before in like a group F occupancy type thing, the magic number is 21 inches. I mentioned mid rail, top rail, and toe kick. That's where that comes from right there. 21 inches is what that maximum width can be. So 21 plus 21 is 42. That's why they came up with 21. Okay, exit access travel distance. This is important. So anywhere within a building, let's say a group B occupancy, it's sprinklered, you have to be able to access an exit, whether it's an exit passageway, exit stairway enclosure, or an exit door going outside within 300 feet. Magic number. If you violate that, you have to have what's called horizontal exits. But just keep in mind, know this section. This is an actual test question. The test question was if you had like a group A occupancy that did not have suppression, what's the exit access travel distance? Is 200 feet. Oh, keep in mind here, you're allowed to bump that up to 400 feet. This will be a test question if you're Group F1, Group S1, and you're suppressed and you had 20-foot ceilings. It'll talk about that, 24-foot ceilings. This also applies to S2. There's another section that does it. Just look through for the exemptions. But point is, this calls out F1 and S1, 400 feet exit access travel distance if you meet these requirements. Let's jump over to aisles really quick. Aisle spacing is different a corridor. If you're walking down a hallway, a traditional hallway with 2 walls and a ceiling, that's a corridor. Aisle space is like you're walking down this area bounded by like clothes racks on either side and a mercantile, or maybe some storage shelves or cubicle walls in a group B occupancy. Aisle spaces are different. You're allowed to go down to 28 inches if it's a non-public aisle, like a back room in a storage area type thing. So just keep that in mind. 28 inches is the minimum, but typically it's 36 inches everywhere else. If you're serving less than 50 people, it's 44 inches if you're above 49 people. And this section's where it's going to call it out. And over here as well. I'll show that to you in a sec. Let's see. So... yeah, more aisle space, Group B and M, 28 inches, 28 inches. Okay, so over here, let's take a look at this so you can understand it. Required fire resistance rating. If you have suppression, a lot of stuff goes away. But typically, and like let's just target a B occupancy really quick. If you are in a B occupancy, you have to have 1 hour 1 hour corridor rated barriers if you are not suppressed, if you're serving more than 30 people. So it just, that's how you read that table. This is a test question. The question was, you had a B occupancy with a suppression system. What's the required corridor fire barriers? And it's 0. That's the actual test question. That was right off the test. So if you have 49 or less people, don't get confused. 50 people, they'll use this interchangeably. Less than 50 or 49 or less. But it's 36 inches, otherwise it's 44 inches. You have some other situations, corridor widths need to be 96 inches in a hospital type thing. So there's a few odds and ends there. All right, dead end length. 25 feet's typically, 20 feet's the magic number here, 20 feet. But they'll ask you this. This is a test question. If you're a B occupancy, you're suppressed, you can go to 50 feet, right there. That's what they're going to ask. Let's see. So egress balconies. So like if you're in a motel or something, just know that it's the same egress requirements as corridors. They'll say, you know, you have this hotel. It's an outdoor balcony, a balcony around an atrium, for instance. What's the minimum width for 50 people? And you'd say 44 inches. So just go back to the other section, but this is what allows that. Stairway identification sign. So if you have multiple stores, you have to assign at each floor landing an interior exit stairway enclosure, a ramp. More than 3 stories. The reason for that is they've had a few fires, one fire particularly, I think, was it MGM Grand? I think it was MGM Grand that drove this change back in 1980 in Las Vegas. But what happened was you need signs on the inside of the stairway enclosure, and you have to have that. So it's a test question. You're required to have it. The number is above 3 stories high, so it's right there. Exit passageways. If you're in a mall, you'll see these exit passageways, because you can't hit exit access travel distances. Sometimes you'll have exit passageways, and it has like 1 hour rated construction or more if it's necessary. So you'll see these in like big malls a lot. There's very specific requirements. You can't have any penetrations or windows or things like that in exit passageways. But it's 44 inches minimum width. Less than 50 is 36. Same rules apply as we just talked about for corridors. Okay, just know that there's no penetrations are very limited. 16 square inches for steel box, like an electrical receptacle or outlet box. It's a test question for an exit passageway right there. Just giving it to you. Okay, let's get through this here. Horizontal exits. What it is, these are required in hospitals, but a horizontal exit is where you have like a door that separates 2 sections of a building, and you open it up, you go into, I-2 is a hospital, for instance. Because you have fire-rated construction, when you go through from one side to the next side, you're considered out of the building and into a next section. So basically, if there's a fire on one side, you go through a horizontal exit and you're safe. So this tells you how much of the building can be a horizontal exit, is what that's saying. So just read these. It's an actual test. This was an I-2. The question was, horizontal exits are permitted to comprise 2/3 of the required exits. And there's so many required exits. We already talked about that previously, how many exits or exit access doors are required in a room. If it's more than 49 people, you need 2, that kind of thing. So you're allowed, or 3, depending on if you're over 500 people. So that's how, what this means is you can actually consider a horizontal exit as one of those 3, let's say. In a hospital, that was in a hospital. Normal buildings, you could consider it half, but hospital, it can be considered a 1/3 of it. All right, egress courts. Courts have a very specific definition, so look at that in Chapter 2 or one of the other ICC Sections, assembly occupancy. Let's see. So this just tells you that your doors, your actual exit doors, you have to have, like, your main door has to be able to support half of the overall assembly occupancy. So if you've ever been in a movie theater and they have all those doors up on the front of the building, it's because of this requirement here. So just take a look at that. Common path of travel shall not exceed 30 feet. Remember, this is assembly occupancy, so it's specific for certain assembly occupancies. There's some allowances here, so read through those. You have, like, aisle seating. You'll need to calculate aisle seating. So minimum aisle widths. So for level or ramped aisles having seating on both sides, you have to have 42 inches for the width of the aisle right there, or the ramp. So 36 inches where the aisle serves less than 50 seats. So I saw these as test questions. Just be aware that this is here. So if you're dealing with an assembly occupancy, they're going to ask, what's the aisle width for a movie theater, okay? You're going to normally go to like 1017 or 1020, whatever, but come to 1029. Remember, section 1029 is here. Just highlight that. There are going to be some subtle differences between the 2024 and the 2015 in terms of reference numbers, but the actual numbers in terms of widths, they're identical. They're not going to change. It's exactly the same. Dead-end aisles. Dead-end aisle is a little bit different in assemblies. 20 feet across the board, but you can make your corridor width 20 feet and change things a little bit, but just read that if there's questions on dead ends for assemblies. Seating at tables. I had a test question here. Just go ahead and read through that. You see where I circled. Don't want to waste time talking about it. So clear width aisle access ways. So if you have like a main ramp in a movie theater and then you have these little aisles going off to the side with seats, this is where they're going to talk about rows of seating and widths, things like that. So just look at this, look at my notes, read through it. There's actually a formula you can use. Width of 12 inches between rows shall be increased by 0.6 for every additional seat beyond 7 seats. There's a formula you're going to follow. You can go online if you don't understand it, and there's some test questions you can help figure that out. Okay, just highlight the stuff I've highlighted. It'll help you. Just read through this. We don't have time to go through this. You don't want to waste any more time than I'm already wasting. Let's see, handrails. Let's see, minimum size. Oh yeah, so emergency escape and rescue. This is really important. They will ask you about this. Emergency escape and rescue openings need to be 5.7 square feet. The minimum dimensions are 24 by 20. These are test questions you're going to get. And emergency escape and rescue opens shall have the bottom of the clear opening not greater than 44 inches. What this means is if you have a basement and you have a windowsill, it can't be more than 44 inches above the floor for you to access it. And so these are egress window requirements here. IRC is a little bit different. They have different numbers associated with second floor, for instance. But the test question is going to come from here for the IBC or the IFC. This is where you're going to see it. Okay, I think that's it for Chapter 10. I want to call it quits for this Part 2. Keep these snippets low. We'll start with Chapter 11 next time. Thanks for watching this, and have a good day.